Imagine the two most powerful empires on Earth, existing at the exact same moment in history, separated by thousands of miles of desert, mountain, and ocean. One built roads that still exist today. The other built walls that stretched beyond the horizon. One conquered the Mediterranean. The other conquered everything from Korea to Central Asia. They both knew the other existed. They both wanted to meet, and yet they never did. This is the story of Rome and Han China, the greatest collision in human history that almost happened, and the single man whose lie kept two superpowers apart forever. History has a strange obsession with timing. When Rome was in its golden age, when the Senate still held power, when Roman legions were carving through Europe, when the Mediterranean was becoming a Roman lake, on the exact opposite end of the Eurasian continent, the Han Dynasty was doing something remarkably similar. Same era, different hemisphere, two civilizations running parallel scripts. Both were forged through war. Both built empires that dwarfed everything around them. Both believed, with total conviction, that they were the center of the known world. And here's the thing nobody tells you. They actually knew about each other. The Han Dynasty, called Rome de Qin, Great Qin. That name alone tells you everything. The Han Dynasty named itself after China's first great unifying empire, the Qin Dynasty. To call Rome Great Qin was the highest compliment in the Chinese vocabulary. It was their way of saying, these people are our equals. The Book of the Latter Han, an official imperial historical record, described the Romans as tall, fair, and upright in posture, resembling the people of China. For an empire that spent most of its existence militarily humiliating its neighbors, comparing you to Chinese people was the ancient equivalent of a Michelin star. And the Romans? They called China Serica, the land of silk. They described it as vast, just, peaceful, and prosperous. Ironically, they thought the Han Dynasty never went to war. Rome, a civilization that had conquered half the known world through pure military aggression, admired what they believed was a pacifist empire on the other side of the world. They had absolutely no idea. The year is 97 AD. Eastern Han Dynasty. A general named Ban Chao has spent decades expanding Chinese influence deep into Central Asia. He has fought wars, forged alliances, and pushed the boundaries of the known world further west than any Chinese official before him. And now he wants to go further. He sends his most trusted envoy, a man named Gan Ying, westward with a singular mission: find De Qin, make contact, and open relations with Rome. Gan Ying travels for months, through the scorching deserts of Xinjiang, through the mountain passes of Central Asia, through the ancient cities of Iran. He crosses empires, negotiates safe passage, and pushes west until he arrives at the edge of the Parthian Empire, modern-day Iraq, where the western border opens toward Rome. He is close, genuinely, historically close. And then he meets the Parthian king. The king receives him graciously. Food, rest, hospitality. And then, with the calm confidence of a man who has done this before, he sits Gan Ying down and begins to talk. To reach De Qin, the king says, you must cross the sea. You sail from the Persian Gulf. The waters are violent. The winds are unpredictable. The journey takes 3 years at minimum. And the ocean, it is filled with creatures that drive men to madness. Gan Ying stared at him. What had been a manageable overland journey suddenly sounded like sailing off the edge of the universe. He turned around, went home, and Han China and Rome never spoke again. Here is what makes this moment so extraordinary. The Parthian king was lying. He knew exactly where Rome was. He had been fighting Rome for decades. He knew the journey was difficult, but not impossible. The Parthians sat directly between Han China and Rome. They controlled the Silk Road. They were the middlemen of the ancient world's most profitable trade network. If Han China and Rome established direct contact, their own trade routes, their own diplomatic channels. The Parthians lost everything. One lie, one frightened envoy. And the greatest meeting in ancient history never happened. Now here is where history gets genuinely fascinating, because Rome thought Han China was peaceful. Let that sink in for a moment. The Han Dynasty was arguably the most militarized agrarian civilization in human history. Historian Ray Wang described the Qin Han period as China's first empire, and argued its martial intensity exceeded even the later Tang Dynasty at its peak. The Han didn't just inherit the warring state's military system, they amplified it. They turned an entire nation into a single, unified war machine, and the results were brutal and utterly relentless. Kill a Han envoy? The southern Yu king did exactly that, and Han armies arrived immediately, dissolving his entire kingdom into 9 commanderies. The king of Daiwan killed a Han envoy over a horse dispute. The envoy had walked into the king's palace, demanded his most prized national treasure, and when refused, insulted him to his face. The king had him executed. The Han responded by mobilizing a campaign so vast it stretched supply lines across thousands of miles of desert, ultimately hanging the king's head at the palace gates in Chang'an. This is why the General Chen Tong could declare without any theatrical exaggeration, "Those who offend the might of Han, though they be far, shall be punished." To modern ears it sounds like a slogan. To every neighboring nation in 36 BC, it was a promise they had watched be kept, repeatedly, without a single exception. The Han military machine ran entirely on incentive. Every soldier who fought received land, rank, and money. After the decisive Battle of Mobei, where Han cavalry shattered the Xiongnu deep in the Gobi Desert, Emperor Wu distributed half the imperial treasury to his troops. Half. The treasury of the most powerful empire in Asia, handed directly to soldiers. When the court issued a mobilization order, men didn't walk to the front. They ran, howling, as if settling personal scores. But Rome was no pushover. Not even close. Understand this. Roman civilization lasted over 2,000 years, and it evolved, adapted, and innovated across centuries in ways that gave it generational advantages over every enemy it faced. The key transformation came in 107 BC, when a Roman consul named Marius did something that seems obvious in retrospect, but was genuinely revolutionary at the time. He created a professional army. Before Marius, Roman soldiers were citizen volunteers. Rich men bought heavy armor and fought as legionaries, while the truly destitute threw javelins and hoped for the best. Marius abolished this entirely. He opened military service to everyone regardless of wealth, standardized equipment at state expense, paid regular salaries, and required a 16-year service commitment. In doing so, he created something Europe had never seen, a standing professional force, trained relentlessly, equipped uniformly, and devastatingly effective. The result was an infantry force so tactically refined it could do something that defied military logic: stand its ground against cavalry charges. Roman formations were layered, disciplined, and terrifyingly cohesive. Forests of spears to blunt charges, interlocked shields to absorb volleys of arrows, engineering units that could build fully fortified camps overnight, turning any patch of open ground into a defensible stronghold. The Roman legion wasn't just a fighting unit. It was a mobile fortress that moved, adapted, and destroyed. Where Han China's greatest strength was mobility, vast cavalry sweeping across steppes, outflanking enemies, vanishing before a counterattack, Rome's greatest strength was unbreakable ground dominance. Two different philosophies of war, both perfected to an extraordinary degree. Here is the honest answer to who would have won. Nobody knows. And that ambiguity is precisely what makes this question endure 2,000 years later. Han China had numbers, resources, and mobility that Rome simply could not match. The Han war economy could mobilize 100,000 cavalry and 140,000 supply horses simultaneously. No European power of that era came remotely close. But Rome had something Han China consistently struggled with in prolonged conflicts: war profitability. Roman campaigns paid for themselves through plunder, tribute, and territorial acquisition. Han wars against the Xiongnu were economically devastating. Even Emperor Wu's greatest victories nearly bankrupted the empire and triggered widespread civil unrest. A short decisive engagement in open terrain? Han cavalry would likely overwhelm Roman formations through sheer speed and numbers. A prolonged campaign across foreign territory? Rome's professional discipline and self-sustaining war economy might simply outlast Han's supply lines entirely. Two systems. Two military geniuses separated by a continent. Two empires that looked across the Silk Roads of the ancient world and saw in each other something worth respecting. Something that looked, just slightly, like themselves. And they were stopped. Not by war. Not by ideology. Not by incompatible civilizations. But by one man's greed, one envoy's fear, and a boat ride that nobody took. 2,000 years later, we are still asking the question they never got to answer, because the answer, even now, could genuinely have gone either way.